I want to tell you how I've been sober for 13 years, never think about relapse, and how I've built an amazing life. And if you're watching this, it's because you want a different approach. You're tired of the conventional approaches to sobriety. So if that's you, keep watching. If that's not you, if you're cool with just being once an addict, always an addict, living in fear of relapse and all of that, just go ahead and click off. But if you're like, hey, I want to do something differently, that's what I want to share. That's what this is all about. The whole reason I make content, the whole reason I put this stuff out is because I'm really interested in helping people see that sobriety is not an achievement. It's not a place you're getting to. It's a lifestyle. It's a way of life. And it's going to be way better than anything else that you're leaving behind in your addiction. So if you want a different way, keep watching, and thanks for your time. All right, let's get into it, guys. How I have stayed sober for 13 years, never think about relapse, and have an amazing life. See, we're going to get into my story, a timeline, and this is not always, what I've believed, but I had an experience in part of my journey in sobriety that really changed how I viewed what sobriety is and how to approach it. And I've been through it myself. I've worked in a rehab setting and then, lived life after that. And I really see a lot of people struggling because they are using the old school once an addict, always an addict, fearing relapse, coping mechanism, understanding the past type of approach that does not really yield a fulfilling life in the future. And at the end of the day, if you are not enjoying what you're doing, it's very difficult to continue on. But if we can shift that, if we can adjust where the focus is, we can usually end up in a much better place. So do you want to leave addiction behind and build a dramatically fulfilling future? That's the question. That's what this video is about. It's about understanding where we're going and understanding what it means to be sober and redefining that. So who is this video not for? Who this video isn't for? This is not going to be for somebody who enjoys being the victim. If you like being a victim, if you like blaming other things and other people and circumstances for where you are, probably not for you. It's not for someone who thinks that he can use substances that are not his substance of a choice. This is about getting rid of it all, like not having any of that stuff. All that stuff is mood-altering substances. My belief is that if you're using any type of thing, even if it's not the one that you were most addicted to, for me it was opiates, then you still have a thing that you're trying to alter your mood, and you got some issues that if you just want to keep going around to that stuff, you might as well be back on your drug of choice. So if you feel like you think you can use whatever you want just as long as it's not your drug of choice, then this isn't for you. This is not someone who would rather stay the same. So if you're not interested in actually changing, actually evaluating where you're at, what you got going on, and doing different things differently, not going to be for you. This is not for someone who is not willing to be brutally honest with themselves. If you're not willing to actually look in the mirror and understand who you are now and where you want to be and accept that there's a difference and things that need to change, it's not going to really benefit you. And then also someone who doesn't want to experience a dramatically fulfilling future after addiction. If you just want to kind of maintain a small way of life that's just, let me just sit here and avoid the past and just try not to go back there, and you don't want to move forward and make progress and potentially change lots of pieces of your life and build a future, this isn't going to be for you. Now, who is this video for? Someone who's ready to take ownership. You're just you know what? I want to take ownership. I want to change how I view the world. I want to accept that I am where I am because of me, and I can also be in a different place because of me. This is for someone who is totally done with substances and what comes with them. So you're just you know what? I'm done with it all. I'm ready to be done with it. Got to do that. This is for someone who genuinely wants long-term change. You actually want to go through the process of change. You're willing to expose yourself, be transparent, and actually change things in your life. Someone who's ready to look in the mirror and address his core issues. You're ready to actually look in the mirror and be hey, what's actually the problem? What is going on? Why am I still here? And then someone who wants a dramatically fulfilling future after addiction. This is for people who are you know what? I just am not happy with how things are, and I want to move forward. Because the reality is, I've been on both sides of this. I've been here, and now I'm over here. So I'm not sitting here saying hey, you're wrong for being here. I'm just saying this is what the traditional approaches to sobriety typically build in somebody. They build a certain type of scarcity, passive mindset that is not going to be conducive to making changes. So if you want to keep doing that, that's fine. Don't spend any more time on this video. But if you're like, you know what, man, I believe there is something better out there. There's something different. Then keep watching. Okay. So we're going to talk about my journey here. And the reason I think this is important is because I was in the traditional approach as well. And so I want to kind of walk through my journey and go through where I was and what happened along the way, because these things also, they give context for what we're going to talk about when it comes to actually doing it differently, like approaching sobriety differently. So my journey. All right. So here we have the start. Now, 2004, that's when I was a freshman in high school. But really, like, a lot of my addiction stuff started when I was like a lot younger. I wasn't, my parents weren't around much, I had, some issues in home and stuff like that. And I just kind of developed this mindset of like, I'm just going to take care of myself and do whatever the heck I want. That's kind of what happened. I tried to be autonomous at a very early age. And that just kind of led to me being like, hey, I can do whatever I want to do. I can, figure it out. Like, I can just live a certain type of lifestyle and I don't need to answer to anybody else. Okay. Not necessarily a bad thing, but in the context of like, living in addiction, definitely not good. So the start, that's 2004, freshman in high school. I had a job at a car wash and I was getting tips. So I always had money, and I started getting into drinking and partying, and then started getting into harder drugs. And so the reason I say this was the start was I also easily could spend money and figure out how to get high. So like, I never had the issues of not enough money to go out. I never had the issues of, being able to acquire drugs, or I would pay gas money for people to get rides. Like, I wasn't bound by my parents having to ask them to get somewhere or work around that. Like, I had other places, and so I started experimenting with drugs, going to parties and stuff like that. And really from 2004 to 2006, I transitioned into using opiates, not on a everyday basis, but I do remember the first time I used opiates. I remember taking 2 Oxycontin 5 milligram tablets, and then at school, and my sister picked me up, and I remember my brother-in-law and sister, I was in the back of the car, and I was like, guys, guess what I did? Because they used to party, like they would drink and smoke a little bit of weed. But I told them that I'd taken the Oxycontin, and it was like really awesome. And they're like, hey, you gotta be careful with that stuff. You can get addicted to it. And I was 15, and I remember being like, nah, I'm not gonna get addicted to it. And so kind of crazy story to think I said that and then it eventually did. But then the catalyst. So in 2006, the fall of 2006, I got into a car accident. I was leaving school. I was driving. I was in my sister's truck, F-150, and I was coming to down a hill, and there was a couple cars stopped, and the truck in front of me was stopped, and I rear-ended that truck. And there was a guy, his name was Josh Dickerson. So I was a junior in high school. He was a sophomore. He got ejected out of the truck. He hit his head on the curb, and he died 2 days later. And I just leaned heavy into drugs. I started using, actually cocaine at that time was the thing I was using on a daily basis. I was staying awake all night, going to school, and then kind of sleeping during the day. And so that was 2006. And then that, cascaded into a lot of issues. And that year I played lacrosse, and that year I was like, hey, I'm just going to play lacrosse, and I'm not going to drink, I'm not going to do drugs. And so I kind of leaned into it. But one of the points here is I didn't use any drugs, but I still had all the issues, and I was using my performance in lacrosse as the thing that I was addicted to. So I was leaning into that. And, I had people reaching out, hey, do you need help? Like, do you need to talk about this? Like, what's going on? And I just told people I was fine. Like, and I just dealt with a really traumatic thing. I had to go to court for it. I actually got charged with involuntary death by motor vehicle. At first it was vehicular manslaughter, but they got it reduced down and stuff like that. But so I went through all that. And then that summer of 2006 into 2007, which is my senior year, my graduating year of high school, I just went off the rails. Like, I was getting high pretty much every day, whether it was smoking weed or some sort of pills or whatever. And then I was, partying on the weekends and stuff. And specifically what happened was in 2006, end of the junior year, going into that summer, which the 2006 school year goes into 2007. I went, and my girlfriend at the time, she cheated on me with a guy that I played lacrosse with. And then I drank every day. That summer, led into that school year. And so I just was really getting to where I was using every single day. And my quote in my high school yearbook is one life to live. Now, I still believe in that, but like at the time, it wasn't the same. Like it was a different thing, right? It was like, hey, I'm here to party, here to get high and stuff like that. So then I went to college at Appalachian State, found a guy that sold pills, and I started using pills basically every day. And so I was getting high every single day. And then that was 2007 into 2008. Then that summer, I started hanging out with a guy who sold Oxycontin, like 80 milligram tablets. And I had seen them before and all that. But, and I had been sniffing pills for a while, but that's when I started taking 80s, grading it up, and sniffing the whole thing. And so that was really the beginning of the end for me. And so I started using every day, and I got to the point where I was using like 6 to 8 80 milligram tablets a day on average, sometimes a little more, sometimes a little less. And back in the day, I think 80 milligram tablets, they cost $60 a piece. So like you can do the math. So I basically became a criminal. I was, stealing guns, stealing scrap metal, just lying for my family, stealing, pawning my dad's tools and stuff like that. And I was really like, I was just an addict, man. Like I did live in my house. I slept there, but I would leave. I would, lie about where I was. I would just avoid everything. And everything was about addiction. It was all about serving my addiction. It was what my world lived around. I got down to about 120 pounds at the time. And actually I'll have to upload a picture later, but like I got a picture of me at my sister's graduation, the height of my addiction. I'm just skinny as a rail. Like right now I weigh 165 pounds, but back then I weighed 120 and I'm the same height. So, 5'8", and just a really bad place. And what happened, this is what, when we get to this first attempt, it was my first attempt at like rehab sobriety. What happened was I'd pawned some of my dad's tools, and he came up to me and he was like, hey, where are my tools? And I made some story up about, maybe someone stole them or something like that. And he goes, okay, that's it. You're out of here. You're either going to get help or you're going to be homeless. And so at the time I just was like, well, I don't want to be homeless. And so I decided I'll go try rehab. And so the first attempt at rehab, I went through a ministry called Teen Challenge, and it's a year-long program. I went from August of 2009 to July 30th of 2010. And this was what's crazy, and it's kind of the beginning of my framework for what I believe about addiction recovery and what I believe about helping people experience long-term sobriety. So I was there for a year. And basically my entire belief system was built on, I need to figure out how to not use opiates. That was like my whole thing. Because like while I was in the program, like we snuck weed in, like we would dip tobacco even though we weren't supposed to have it. I was writing letters to girls and stuff like that. When I went home for my passes, I drank some, I hooked up with girls. Like I was doing these things, and because I was doing them, I was, basically not in compliance, but really what was happening was the inward belief of, hey, I just need to learn how to get off opiates was manifesting, and I was still doing all the other stuff. And so I thought I just needed to learn the skills so that I could go home, go back to the usual environment, the normal things I was doing, which I was trying to go to college, get a business degree, have some sort of job, and then, something like that, right? Like that was my belief system. And so I just figured I need to go back to that, but just without opiates. Okay. So July 30th, 2010, I get done with the program. I graduate. The month leading up to it, I knew I was like, I don't know if this is going to be a good thing. Well, get home. First day I'm home, relapse. I go out and drink with an old friend. And within a couple of weeks, I'm back on pills. So that's, fall of 2010 into the winter of 2010. And so that's why this says the bottom again, And what was crazy was it happened so fast. Like I got to the point of where I was previously in about like this took like a good, 2004 at 5 years. In a couple months, I was back to where I was 5 years prior. So it was rapid, and I was just living a lie. Like people were asking like, where were you last year? Like when I was in rehab, cause at this point I'm 21, I can drink legally, all that type of stuff. And they're like, well, where have you been? I'd be making stuff up and all that. A couple people knew, but I just was trying to like cover up my identity. I was like ashamed of it. I didn't like the feeling of talking about being in rehab, that I had a problem. All my peers were like further ahead in life than me. At least that's what I perceived. And so I really just struggled like a lot mentally. Not only was the addiction there, but like just mentally I was struggling. And so I got to January of 2011. That's why this one says 2011 for the bottom again, and then the true change. And I was sitting in my mom's house, And I looked out the window, and there's a spiritual component for my recovery, but at the end of the day, this is about just principles. But I just had this moment where I looked out the window. I was like, God, I was like, if I just do whatever it is you want me to do, then I know I won't be back here. And that cascaded into a series of decisions. So like the first thing I thought was, well, I obviously need to go somewhere to get help and like get out of where I'm at. Because I was at home again. I was back in the same environment, everything. And I was like, well, let me call my friend Darren, who still works at Teen Challenge. Told him what's up. He called me back like a couple hours later and said, hey, I got a spot for you in Buffalo, New York. So that's where I enrolled to go to. And that was the first piece, right? And the reason I say that is my dad was very supportive. He was like, hey, if that's what you think you need to do, go do it. Like, go back to the same program. But like my mom, my sister, my godmother, they all were like, well, the program didn't work. Why would you go back to it? And my dad died in 2013. So this is before he died, a few years before. But what he understood was it wasn't the program's fault. It was me, right? It was who I was, my belief systems, and what I believed about what I was showing up to that changed everything, right? So this time I was the one that wanted to go. I was ready to change. And I realized, like, the first base level of change is I got to change my environment. And environment's a couple things. It's the people you're around, it's the physical locations, but it's also the things that you're consuming. Like, you're consuming this right now. My goal is to change your internal environment, like to change your belief systems and what you think is possible and what you think is real and not real and what you think is the right or wrong way. Because if that stuff's all rigid and fixed and it keeps leading you back to the same place, it doesn't matter what you do, that belief system, that internal environment is going to lead you back to there. And then the external environment is very strong. The people you're around, the places, right? So I just realized I got to get out of this environment, okay? So I go to Buffalo, and that's where this says the true change. It was the beginning of the process of realizing that I needed to approach this differently. Like, this isn't just about getting off drugs. This is about truly becoming a different person. This is like about building a different lifestyle. So when I went to the program, the first thing I thought was, well, obviously I wasn't very good at managing my time. So let me just follow the schedule of the program. They had a rigid schedule of when you had to be where, do what you do. I just was like, let me just do the thing, right? Let me just comply. And that led to other things, right? But the fundamental thing there was, I was like, let me just do this because it's in the doing of it that changes what I believe about myself. And it's the first base level of change, which is complying to the environment that I was in. So I start hitting, doing the schedule and stuff like that. And what started to happen was, like, internally, I started to look at myself differently. I started to be like, oh, I'm making progress. And it was like, still had some debt, still had some financial issues, definitely screwed up some relationships, still had a bunch of other problems, but daily, I was showing up and stacking wins. I was doing the things that I committed to showing up to, and I was starting to change my internal belief system and identity. Okay. The one thing I love about Teen Challenge is they're about, okay, yeah, that was your past, but like, what do you do now? Like, that's the process of Christian discipleship. It's how I build my stuff. I think about, well, I get that stuff happened in the past, but like at the end of the day, you're trying to build a lifestyle of sobriety now. Understanding the past can help you understand some things, but there are just some basic things that we need to start doing or holding ourselves accountable to begin walking in sobriety. But like, you can view those actions as wins, even though they're not changing your current situation right now. So like, I showed up and I was, following the schedule and stuff like that. I wasn't making any money, so I wasn't making any progress on, the financial side, but I was laying the framework for when I did have the opportunity to work and do stuff like that, I could then be responsible with my time and what I did with it so that I could produce it. So there are things that these things correlate to. And this is one of the biggest problems with the traditional approach to sobriety is it's very black and white. It's like, just do this or that. But actually, when you talk about building a new belief system and identity, one piece of it can overflow into everything else. Okay. So I was like, hey, different approach now. It's not about understanding my psychology and building coping mechanisms and all that. It's actually building a different lifestyle, which is like, what are the things that I do? What are the things that I believe? And so that's when that process started, from 2011 to 2012. So I was in the program for a few months. I worked there for 18 months. So I also worked on the other side where I saw people coming in and I saw how powerful like certain belief systems would pull people back. Like, they would be in the program for a couple months and then get a little clean time and they'd start to feel better physically. And then they think, oh, well, I can just leave now. And it's like, no, you can't leave now. Like, you need to actually spend some time and really change your lifestyle and start changing your identity. But to them, they just thought, oh, I just learned a couple things and I feel good enough. I can go back to my same environment and just live differently. It's the same belief system I used to have. Okay. But the true change was that when I was like, you know what? I probably don't know what's going on. I need some help, and I need to actually change my lifestyle. Like, I need to change like what I believe, what I'm pursuing, what I do on a regular basis. Okay. So then the second chance. So 2013 to 2015, this is when I went to Oral Roberts University. So I went back to college. It's my third time. I graduated with a 4.0. Okay. I'm proud of that because I was committed when I was there, but like, I did view it as a second chance. But the cool part was when I got to college, I literally said like, well, what's going to design my life for success? I didn't go out. I didn't do any of that. I stuck hard with my coursework. I had started doing CrossFit during this time of the true change. That became like a physical outlet, a piece of my identity change, and a big piece of my sobriety. It also, when in 2013, I joined a CrossFit affiliate. I started working out there, building community. I started coaching there. And then of course, eventually started, my own CrossFit affiliate. But the other reason this is called the second chance is this was the first real world application. So like in this time, 2011 to 12, I'd been in rehab. I'd been in a program. I'd been in a very curated environment. Oral Roberts was the time where like, I didn't know a single person there. Like I did not, it was in Oklahoma. I'd been in Buffalo. I'd never been to Oklahoma. The only time I went there was when I visited the university for 2 days in November of 2012. And then I started in the spring, January of 2013. So when I got there, I was like, well, I got to set up in my environment. But guess what I started doing? I started being like, well, what am I going to do on a weekly basis? So like Sundays, I would sit down, plan out my week, work on certain assignments, but also block time in on a daily basis so that I could get stuff done throughout the week without having to stay up late. I never pulled an all-nighter, never stayed up later than 11 my entire 3 years there. And it was because I spent a lot of time thinking, oh, let me think about what I need to do, what's actually important to me, what do I want to happen at the end of these 3 years, and like designing my life like that. And part of that was like eliminating certain things. Like, I don't care about doing this. I don't care about going out. I don't care about doing these things. And so I didn't. And it served me very well. But it's the same thing here was when I changed my approach to sobriety, it also started changing how I viewed success. Okay. So again, when I was in college, I started coaching and doing CrossFit and stuff like that. So then 2016 to 2021, I just sold my gym in the January 1 of 2024. But we started the gym in 2016, and I started with my former college roommate. And the reason this is called the proving grounds. So the ultimate reality of these 5 years was they were hard. I got married. My wife and I did not live together before we got married, so we moved in together. I was running a gym. We struggled to grow. I understood how to coach and deliver, but I didn't understand the other pieces of a business. So like the reason I called this the proving grounds was like, this is where the stress went way up. I'll be honest, in college, the stress didn't feel, there's still a lot of contrived, controlled pieces of the environment. Like you have to pick your classes, but you don't pick the schedule, right? Like they're already pre-made. So you build your schedule based on the classes you want to take. You eat at the dining hall. Like there's a lot of things that were already still controlled. But this was when I was a CrossFit affiliate. There's not a lot of structure to it. You build the structure, you build the times, you build the business. Like you choose how you approach life and build your skills. It's not like a franchise business where they just do everything for you. So like, this was the time where I was putting rubber to the road and understanding who I was and really applying all of these experiences and these changes. And so it was hard. But what I learned, those years where they were financially difficult, there's a lot of stuff going on relationally, in the partnership of the business, with my wife, just with what I believed about myself. Because when I was at ORU, my degree was in biblical literature, New Testament. Still value it, love it. But what I learned in this 5 years, I struggle with I feel like I should be in ministry. But then when I'm doing stuff like this, when I'm coaching people, when I'm helping people actually make change, I feel very alive, and it's a big piece of me. And what I realized is over time, this is the way that I've kind of been designed to help people, is to help adjust their belief systems and change how they view life and actually build momentum in making changes and seeing the fruit of those changes. That's like a skill of mine. And so this was the proving grounds, because I wasn't making any money for it. I was doing a lot of work, not a lot of pay, not being valued very much where I was at. So it was very difficult, but it proved that these changes were real. Like this approach that I changed to was actually real, because I was able to make it through that 5 years. Never once felt like relapsing, never once felt like the stress was pushing me back or I had to go back some way. So it proved my theory, right? And then, so 2022. So 2021, currently I do sales with a company called Bigelow Gyms. And that company helped us turn our gym around. But one of the big things that the leader of that company, Will, taught me is your problems manifesting in your life, they're all personal problems. So whether it's in your business or it's in your relationships or it's in your finances or whatever, you've got personal problems that are manifesting in the business, which again reinforced what I believed about this approach to sobriety, which is it's about a lifestyle change. It's about changing your identity, your beliefs. It's about the inner work, and then it gets expressed externally. And so the 2022, that was the level up, because then I was like, well, what got me here is not going to get me to the next place. So I had to install new beliefs, identity. It didn't just happen this one time, but it's an ongoing thing. And so, we started to grow the gym, started to break some limiting beliefs. Will reached out to me and asked me if he wanted me to help do sales with Bigelow Gyms, which is a much bigger organization, higher revenue, asking people to pay a higher amount. So it was a big step up. But like what happened was my identity changed to where I started believing more about really what I'm doing here. So when you look at, this true change, back then I believed what I believe now, that the approach to sobriety is probably wrong and I need to present it. But it wasn't until here I started leveling up again and being like, hey, I need to do this. Now, all through here, I've always wanted to do something like this content, the coaching, the, helping people actually make progress in their sobriety. I've always had these ideas and I've played around with them, but it wasn't here until here when I was like, I valued what I had to say. Like, I value this. I believe this is powerful. I believe I need to share it. So I'm still going through these evolutions. That's why I call this a journey. Like, I'm still going through these evolutions, but you'll notice I'm not just trying to be sober anymore. Like, I'm trying to grow into where I'm going, right? Now, the exit, that's when I decided to sell the gym. The gym had been a big part of my identity. It served a lot of what I was doing, but I realized like there's something out there in the future for me. A lot of it's what I'm doing. And there's no way that I can do this, do sales at Bigelow Gyms and run a gym and all of that and actually do it well and do it in a way that's actually going to change people's lives. So I chose to exit the gym. There's some divine leading, like me feeling like God was leading me out of it. But at the end of the day, just logically, practically speaking, I just didn't have the time. I didn't have the capacity. I didn't have the ability to actually think about it and do it. So chose to exit the gym. And then the commitment is where I'm at now. I actually moved states. My family, we now live in Asheville, so I've radically changed my environment. And so I'm going through a lot of change right now, but part of that is leaning into it, knowing that this change of environment is what's going to help me lean into doing this for you guys, is actually helping you see it's not about just knowing you have a problem. It's about the traditional approach to sobriety is wrong. Like, it does not lead to what people say it does. And what it leads to is a pretty poor quality of life. So these years, I proved my theory during these times, but right here, I'm leaving my old identity to teach this theory. Like, I'm stepping into building out this belief system and all this type of stuff and helping other people have it and like install it in their lives. And so that's my journey, right? So that's where we get here. So the commitment I have is like, if the traditional approach to sobriety is wrong, like what's the way, right? Like, what's the approach? So I want to kind of like dive into that for a second. So this is the traditional approach to sobriety. Okay. So like, first off, it's like, hey, let's get off the substance, get off of it, go to rehab, go to detox, whatever. Okay. Learn why you use, like what made you want to use in the first place? Like, what's the reason you want to use? And what's funny is every time I ask people that question, they're kind of like, well, if I knew why, I wouldn't be doing it, right? And it's funny because like you kind of look back at why. I'm gonna be honest, like I did some therapy like earlier this year. I really only covered some of the core reasons for why like this year. And I would never have uncovered that if I hadn't gone through some other stuff in my life and gone to therapy and understood it. So it's like you can learn why you use, but like there's a lot of layers to the onion and stuff. And, we're really complex people, and it's like you may not know those things until for a long period of time. So like learning why you use is super important long term, but like it doesn't need to be like this first step. But that's what people do. Then you learn coping skills. So coping skills are just things that help you deal with a problem that's never going away. And then you avoid relapse. So like this is the traditional approach to sobriety. So here's some common beliefs. Once an addict, always an addict. So it's like you have a disease. These two are very interrelated, but like your identity is you're always going to be an addict. So because you were an addict at some point, so because I was an addict back in the day, I now am one. Like that's what this system teaches you. And so what that also means is like relapse is part of recovery. So when you believe that you're an addict, always like I'm an addict. If I were to walk around today saying I'm an addict, I'm an addict, I'm an addict, like the subconscious is very powerful. The subconscious accounts for like 90% of your daily actions and like what's going on behind the scenes. If you subconsciously believe that, like you'll typically make it a lot easier to fulfill those things. So to actually go look for some substance and try to like figure that out and how to get high and how to manipulate people. Like you will go back to that stuff. So when you believe like relapse is part of recovery, like you'll accept relapse. Like you'll accept it for what it is and then just let yourself go back and relapse. Man, this is very deadly stuff right here. Like when you start believing, when you ingrain those beliefs, and that's what like a lot of like AA, NA stuff is built on. And I know there's people that have been sober for long term, but like there's a place where this psychology is not healthy. And then number 4, also like sobriety is an achievement. Like how long have you been sober? Like that's great, but like you don't want to, if you're going to reward length of time, I understand like early on, like stacking some wins. But like if sobriety is an achievement, like what's the achievement? Like at some point, it's not an achievement, it's a lifestyle, right? So it's like if you just got to get to the next year and just got to get to the next year, like why live your life like that where you're just waiting till the next milestone, waiting to the next milestone? Like what about today? Like what about what you're doing today and what that's bringing to you today? Quantity of sobriety is more important than quality of daily life. So this is like, hey, the longer I've been sober is more important than me questioning of like, well, what am I doing with my life? And what's important to me and what's fulfilling to me. And so I think that, people just like, they're just being sober for the sake of length of time they've been sober, but not actually asking the deeper questions of like, what am I doing with my life? Is this appropriate? Do I need to make some changes? You play defense against relapse. So you're always like defending. You're trying to avoid, like there's this, and your life is built on coping with addiction. They're kind of interrelated, but you're always looking over your shoulder. You're always like waiting for the monster to creep up and like show up, that's a draining way to live, to look over your shoulder and always be thinking something's back there. So this is the traditional approach to sobriety, and a lot of people just they go through the cycle of relapse, or they're just like genuinely like sour, unhappy people. Well, I guess today is okay. At least I didn't use today. It's like, okay, that's a good thing, but like there's way more good than that, and there's also somewhere you're going, right? And so this is a very like always looking in the past for things to avoid. But also these people, like they tell war stories, they glamorize their past. There's just a lot of things that are bad about this. And so I see people like this and I think about the concepts of like mental health and just long-term well-being, and thinking like this all the time doesn't really line up. This is a scarcity negative framework. So it's like you're scared, like you're like, hey, I'm scared to do things. Like I don't want to like engage in the world. Like what if I relapse? All this type of stuff. So when you look at this, that's how most people focus on it. And I see a lot of people struggle. I used to think this is the exact same thing I thought the first time I went to rehab. It's like, get off the substance, learn how to go back to my old life just without drugs. Okay. Now this is an alternative approach. Okay. So here you go. Evaluate environment, beliefs, and identity. So actually like sit down and think about like, well, what do you think about? Where are you at? Who do you hang out with? Stuff like that. What do you believe? Like, what do you believe is true and not true? Like, where are the limits that you have in your life? What limits are you setting? Like, are those real limits? And then your identity, like, who do I believe that I am? Like, do I even believe that I'm valuable? Like, do I believe that I'm just worthless and I've done all these bad things and I've thrown my entire life away and there's no hope? If you believe that stuff and you have an identity built on that, what do you think is going to happen? Like, you're going to go back to it because you're like, well, there's nothing good for me to go through. Like, there's no way someone like me could ever achieve anything or move forward or have any type of wholeness because of all this bad stuff I've done. That's all belief and identity stuff, right? So you evaluate the environment, beliefs, and identity. Then you create future targets. So we'll get into this in a little while, but like it's about who you want to be. It's about the person you want to be. And I've never met anybody who doesn't want to improve certain things in their life that are directly related to like the type of character they would become. So like I typically am talking to men. A lot of those people are probably, married or divorced, they've been in relationships or they have kids. And like they want to show up for those people. Like, so there's a target of like being like, for me is I want to be a fit, capable and present dad. Like that's a target, right? And I want to make sure I'm moving towards that. And there are inputs that lead to that. So then you build the appropriate environment and beliefs, like actually designing the environment so that these things are more likely to happen, and the beliefs that they are worth your time, they're valuable, and they're not taking away from your life. So like when I owned my gym, a lot of people believed, and that's misspelled, a lot of people believe that working out, like they'll say like, I don't know if I have time for this. And it's like, well, yeah, if you don't think it's valuable, you won't have time. But if you're like, oh, dude, if I don't do this, like my health is going to be really bad in the future, then you believe that it's valuable, you will build the appropriate environment. So like the belief lies behind it. So when you look at sobriety and like where you're going, if you're creating future targets and you believe that they are appropriate and they're inspiring to you, and you're building your environment that makes it more likely to happen, then you walk into a future where relapse doesn't exist. You walk into a place because you're a totally different person. Like you're not an addict anymore. And that's the long-term success belief number one here. You are a former addict. You can leave it behind. Like you can leave it back there. It's a part of who you are, like your past, but it's not who you are. It's not a part of your identity anymore. You can shed that. You can leave it back there. So that's a huge freeing thing when you adopt that. That's what happened to me the second time, was like, I'm going to do this. I don't want to do this anymore. I want to leave that part of my life behind. Doesn't mean that it wasn't real. I didn't cause the problems and stuff, but like it does mean that I don't have to be like that anymore. I don't have to live like that anymore. Number two, you have a new lifestyle. So you have the opportunity to create something new. And you're going to work through some of the things like maybe the damages you've done in relationships, the financial issues you have. We'll walk through that stuff. But the truth is all that stuff is figure outable. Like you can have a new lifestyle. Just because you create those problems doesn't mean you need to go back to your old lifestyle, but fix it. What you do is you do an entirely new lifestyle. You become the type of person who can adjust those things and show up appropriately. So a good example is like if you've damaged a marriage and there might be a potential of divorce or whatever, like you can show up today and say, you know what, man, I want to be an excellent husband. You can express that today, but like there's a time piece, and then also the other party, it's their option if they don't want to engage in anymore. But it doesn't mean you can't show up as that person today. You can build a lifestyle of like what are the qualities and behaviors of a excellent husband. I can start doing that today. It doesn't mean that everything's going to change around me, but it's my choice, and so I can have a new lifestyle. Relapse is not part of recovery. You don't have to relapse to not go back again. Like there's no proof. That's just a phrase that people say to make themselves feel better. Like, but you don't have to relapse as part of recovery. There's no reason you have to go back. It's just, if you go back, you go back. It's just that. Like if you believe and you create a framework where you allow yourself to go back and you place that as being a part of what the recovery process is, then you're justifying stepping down into the old lifestyle. But if you just finally say, you know what, relapse is not a part of recovery. Relapse is just relapse. It's going back to drugs. It's going back to addiction. And I don't have to do that if I don't want to. Sobriety is a lifestyle and an extremely fulfilling one. So like sobriety is not an achievement. It's not an award. It's not somewhere you get to. It's something you do on a regular basis. And it's extremely fulfilling one. In fact, like I'm sober, but like I don't walk around thinking I'm in sobriety. Like I'm just like, hey, I'm Jonathan. Like I'm pursuing these things now. Like I do what I do. I am who I am. My background is sobriety, and the reason I tell this story is to draw this context out and say, hey, look, like if you actually want to change, like you can, like you don't have to go back. So I use these words, but like I don't walk around saying, oh, I'm sober. Like I'm just like, this is just part of who I am now. It's what I do. Like I don't drink. I don't do those things anymore. Quality of daily life is a goal. So like I focus on quality of daily life. Like it doesn't mean I don't have problems or whatever. Like I definitely have emotions and thoughts and stuff that might not be the greatest, but like I am focused on like, where am I moving towards? Like what quality of life am I building? Like what are the things that I'm working on and where are the outcomes that they lead to? Like, is that the direction I want to go? Okay. And number 6 is closely tied. You play offense for your future. So like you're actually focused on, playing offense to get to your future, not defense to stay away from your past. So you're literally, and that's like, dude, it's July 16th, 2024. I'm right here. But internally, I can either feel like I'm trying to run away from over there or I'm trying to go here. And so I've just chosen to bias offense. And also like this gets into like just success in any area of life. Playing offense is the best strategy. There's a few places where defense makes sense, but for the most part, offense is going to be the better option, right? And then your life is built on becoming a better you. And that's what I was saying earlier. Like, I don't walk around thinking I'm sober anymore. What I think about is like, well, what am I trying to progress? What am I trying to build? Like drawing all this stuff out, this took a lot of time. And so like normally this is one of my better constructed YouTube videos, but it's because I was like, you know what? Like I'm trying to become better at this. I want to be better at communicating these ideals, these principles, these values, this mission, because that's the way I'm going to help people. Like I'm going to help you engage with my content, work with me as your coach, like all this type of stuff, because I'm taking the time to become better at this. So yeah, I want to help people, but like at the end of the day, it's about me getting better. So if I'm deciding like I'm going to do this thing, I'm going to do this for real, I'm going to try to help these people, I want to be a better version of me that does that very well. Like I don't want to just do this like haphazardly. So this is the alternative approach. And what's interesting is like that staircase, like you don't actually stop. Like you consistently come back through this. Like you evaluate, you create, you build, and then you walk into. You evaluate, you create, you build, and you walk into. So like I told you in my thing here, my little timeline, this right here, like the gym had never been as good as it was when I left. Like it was the best the business had ever been. So I left it at, it's generating the most revenue, easiest to run, everything. So like I left something of comfort and all that type of stuff, but it's because I'm going back through this again. I'm evaluating it and I'm creating the future target, and just my future targets don't involve the environment and belief system of being a gym owner anymore. It involves this stuff, like what we're talking about. So even I'm going through this. And what's fun is when you start doing this, like you get so into this, like what you're pursuing, that like relapse just doesn't exist. Like I don't think about it. There's nothing in my past I want to go back to anymore. And so this is what I believe is the alternative approach to sobriety. So let's talk about like designing this a little bit. So I talk about, my podcast is called The Sober State. If you listen to it, I put them on YouTube as well. But living in a state, like if you think about like water, it can be ice, water, or steam. And the two things that help it become those things are temperature and pressure. So like those are environmental things. So if you want to go from ice to water, you have to change those variables to make it. And if you want to go from water to steam, same thing. Okay. So we have to put ourselves into a sober state. So there are certain things that are inputs. So this is a process that I have, and I've coached people through this that are not in sobriety. Like I coach my gym team through this. I've coached people individually through this. And there's a really cool thing that happens when you do it. So the first thing is, the reason I call this long-term success beliefs is like, that's what we're trying to go for. Like when we talk about sobriety, it's a success component. And I want you to start thinking about being successful, like actually succeeding in what you're trying to do. Like, would it be okay if you succeeded in being sober long-term and actually achieving certain things and building a certain quality of life where you have healthy relationships, you have financial success, and you have stability, and you internally feel focused and clear, right? Would it be okay if you were successful in those things? So like success is not a bad word. So first off, define your be, do, and have. Okay, so who do you want to be? So this is this right here. So being is like character traits. So like I want to be a fit, capable, and present dad. That's a who. Okay. So like the what can come from that, but like these are character traits. So when we talk about your be, like your list, it's like, who do you want to be? Like I want to be a faithful husband. I want to be an effective salesman. That's one of mine. Like I want to be an elite communicator. Like these are ideals. These are types of things that like you aspire to be, and they're not usually going to be a thing that's super like tangible, concrete, clear, like you can check it off a box today. It's a type of person you want to be. Okay. Now, what do you want to do? These are things that like lead towards those things. So what do I want to do? Like, I want to work out on a regular basis. I want to work out 4 times a week. That's what I currently do. I do CrossFit. I play pickleball 1 to 2 times a week. But like, what do you want to do? Or could be career. Like, I want to work professionally in sales, or I want to build a YouTube channel, or I want to, like, what do you want to do? This can also be like achievement things of like, I want to climb every 14er in Colorado. That's one of mine. I'm not concerned about how long it was. I used to have one of like, I wanted to be I want to be a cover band drummer, you know, and I still might want to do that one, but we have something to talk about that in a second. So it's like, what do you want to do, you know? And then what do you want to have? Like, you know, do you want to have a house? Do you want to have a boat? Do you want to have, you know, a certain amount of money in your bank account? Do you want to earn a certain amount per year? Like, whatever. Like, it's very important to start defining these things. Like, what do you want? And then you actually write them down, okay? Then you define the standards of those aspects. So let's go back to, who do you want to be? So like for me, a fit, capable, and present dad. Well, the standards are, I have to, like, you know, be pretty clear on what I'm eating. I probably just can't eat haphazardly. I have to have some boundaries there. I have to work out on a regular basis, do fitness. I have to take care of like injuries if they happen. You know, there's different standards, right? So like, if I want to be an effective salesperson, like, I need to review my calls after I've done them. I need to, you know, take notes while I'm doing the call. There are certain things that the standards of those things, okay? Then you have to build accountability to ensure standards are upheld. So like, that's big when you come back to here. So like right here, the true change was like me changing internally, but like these 2 things, that's where like I had to make sure I had accountability built in so that I could, you know, make progress, right? So the second chance, the proving grounds, like going to college, starting the gym and everything, I had to have accountability. And there's certain things in there that I didn't do as well as I wanted to, right? So it's like, I'm not saying here I'm perfect, but like, the reason I had success in some of those things was because of the standards. It was the accountability that made me uphold. And then use feedback to determine the course, and then you revisit the be, do, and have. So, for example, who do you want to be? I want to be a fit, capable, present dad. Okay, define the standards, build accountability. Now use feedback. How have I been doing? Do I need to make some changes? And the most important part about this is like, you don't use judgment. Like, you don't tell yourself you're a bad person, but you just say, hey, like, you know, that worked or that didn't work. Like, let's make a change and let's readjust, right? And so you keep going back through this. And so here's what's interesting. So remember I told you, like, who do I want to be? Like, or what do you want to do? Like, I want to be a cover band drummer. Like, I want to be a drummer. But as I had a list on it. I had it on a note card. And I recommend writing it down and actually diving into it. But I would walk around with it and I'd look at it. I'm like, why do I want this here? And then what I realized was like, the reason I wanted it was because at the time I was still working through, you know, being at the gym and my identity and stuff. And the reason I wanted to be a cover band drummer was because I wanted people to validate me, and the idea of being on stage and being cheered for was a way to be validated rather than like other measures of success. So the whole reason I wanted to be it was because it was a different way for me to experience validation rather than other things that were more important to me. And so I took it off the list. But that only came through this process. So like, when you do this, you may say like, oh man, I want a $5 million mansion. But then like, you may work through this process and be like, I don't want that. I only want that because it makes me feel better about what people think about me. And then, but you may come back to it and be like, you know, I really want it. Like, I enjoy like beautiful design. I enjoy living in these certain areas. I like the space. Like, and that's okay. Like, that's what this is important. And you'll notice these all 3 say want. So many people live their life on like what needs to be justified and like, do I need that? Or this is about what you want. And what I believe is that if you go through this process enough, like, you're not going to be a selfish, conceited person, because you're always coming back to these character traits. Like, who do you want to be? Who's the person that you're trying to become? And my belief is that when people actually want to change, they're never trying to change into a worse person. They're trying to evolve into a better version of themselves. So if you follow this process, my bet is that you're going to end up where you want to be. But like, you know, there's some help and stuff like this. Like, I've worked with people and you know, one of the things that helps having someone watch this process is they can ask questions and understand it. And then a little hack is, when you do this your first time, is instead of doing it in the positive, you can do it in the negative. So you can say, who do you not want to be? What do you not want to be doing? And what do you not want to have or be dealing with? That's a good way to start. So, but this is building a sober state. And you'll notice like there's no end to this. Like we keep doing this. It's a system that feeds it, but it's the iteration. It's the willingness to set the standards, hold accountable, and then do feedback. And then did that line up with who I want to be, what I want to be doing, and what I want to have? Does that line up? Am I actually moving forward in the right process? So this has served me very well. Good example is I want to make $100,000 a year. Like I remember when I wrote that down I wrote it down less than a year, I was making it. And I was only making like 30 grand before that. I can't explain it to you very much, but it just was like, I just want it. And so like I started thinking about it. I would look at it and I would realize it. And then eventually I was doing it. Right. And now I'm making, well over that. But like this is a very powerful process if you lean into it, because you're becoming a certain type of person, which leads me to the last little part here. Okay. So when we look at this, the big thing is, again, one of the core beliefs of the traditional approach to sobriety is that it's an achievement. What we need to start looking at is this is like a lifestyle. This is an ongoing thing. And so this is kind of, when we look at, this is a hurricane map, right? So like when we look at this, I'm just going to extend these out some so that we can kind of really see. Okay. So like when you look at a hurricane map, when they make it, like they have this predicted path, right? And then whenever the hurricane moves up some, so this moved from here to here, now the predictor map is like this, okay? So like we draw these, let's just pull these out a little bit more. Okay, there's that. And then this one, we'll do it even more, okay? So like when you think about change, a lot of people think, well, once I get there, I'll be happy, okay? But the point of this is like, hey, here's where I'm at. I'm trying to go in this general direction. The most important part is you're not going these other directions. And then so you go here and you get to here, right? But then you adjust course, it's going here. But look how this and this is inside of that, right? So like you've moved up some, but now this is eliminated and this is eliminated. Now you're in this tighter area. Then here, same thing. Like there's this space right in here and this space right in here. Now you're moving. So like when I look at my life, when I go back here, like when I was here, I went to school. I went to Oral Roberts. I went for biblical literature. I thought I was going to be preaching. That's what I thought, right? But what I didn't realize is I learned how to work with people and communicate. And then I started running a business where I started coaching and actually diagnosing problems and helping people actually make changes, like with the core things. And then I got to the place where I was going to value how I could do that. I exited the thing that was limiting me, and now I'm committed to doing this. So like down here, when we look at this, like early on, I thought this whole thing, like this was like preaching, this was like working in a church, but then like I got here and it evolved, and then I got here and then it evolved. So like you're becoming a type of person, but like like for me, coming back to like, I want to be a fit, capable, present dad. There's many things that fit into that, but certain principles that must be present. So like when I was going through this process, I'm doing this on a regular basis. Now, at first I didn't have a definition for this. This was not like a super clear thing, but over time I started to be like, oh, now I understand this. But here, as you move along, like you may think you're going one place, but then you get here and then you realize the trajectory here. And then you realize the trajectory here. So like even me, I'm still learning this, right? Like I'm still kind of understanding what I'm doing and I'm walking through it. But that's why, it's a journey. But again, it's a type of person. Like I am the type of person who likes to create things. Like I'm the type of person who likes to help people get unstuck. I like to help people generate momentum and actually take the first few steps, because a lot of the times people are simply just stuck from taking the first step. And if they can be given a pathway and clarity, they're more likely to do it. And then once they tip over that edge, they'll be like, and think about how many times you've said this. If you're watching this far, then you're really listening now. I wish I would have done that sooner. How many times have you said that, right? How many times have you said, I wish I would have done that sooner? Well, what that's symptomatic of is you wanted to change, but you were just unsure of if it was worth your time or energy or if it was the right thing to do. So you stop, you don't do it. Humans are really good at not doing something for one more day, like just avoiding change. But when you start to do it like this, and you have a target identity, like a long-term thing that you're going for, and then you start working practically through your daily life towards certain of those things, like you'll get somewhere and then you just course correct a little bit. But like the process of growth is what leads you here. You don't need to know everything. And I struggle with this. I overthink. I think I need to know everything. I need more information. But the reality is I just need to take certain actions. And every time in my life, when I start finally just taking certain actions, normally something happens where I'm like, oh, here we are. Okay. So this is my life. This is what I've learned. But my goal is, like I was telling you now, and my mission, like what I'm committed to, is how can I help people go from here to here faster than 10 years or 10 years, 11 years. How can I do that? How can I help someone understand, learn, and grow in a year or two what it took me 10, 11 years? That's the question, right? So I do appreciate your time. I really appreciate you watching this. I have a little thing in the bottom. You can book a call, and you also can just join my email list. But the reality is, I want to coach people. Like I want to help with this. So I'm building a program because I have invested in coaching for many years. And what I've learned is when I finally invest in it, I just take a higher level of action, but then I get focused. Like a lot of the noise starts to come down. So like you can definitely try to apply these principles work great. But like if you're like, I need help with the noise and stuff like that, I'd be happy to talk. If you get on a call with me, it's not a sales call. Like I'm not doing sales calls anymore. I do sales for my work, but I'm not doing it for this. This is for people who want help, right? So if you want to do it, you just book a free call, because at the end of the day, I just want to help people, right? And then if it fits where we can work together, we can talk about that, but we don't need to do that. We need to start with like, where are you at here? Like how do we change to this? How do we get this moving? That's what we want to do, right? So again, I appreciate your time. If you need any help, like I said, join the email list or, just book a quick call with me. But I'll be happy to connect with you guys. Thanks. I'll see you guys next time.